Hi HR Nation, it's Chris Rainey. Welcome to HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR practitioners 5 days a week. Today, we're very lucky enough to be joined by Dawn Klinghoffer. Dawn is the General Manager of HR Business Insights at Microsoft. Dawn, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Chris. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm glad now you're here, so that's good. Dawn, fill in the gaps. Tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and your journey to where we are now.
Yeah, so I have always been a numbers person. I was a math major in college. In fact, it's so funny because just this week, I have two daughters. I have a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. And my 15-year-old is taking AP calculus. And 2 nights ago, she came home and she said, she just seemed a little off and wasn't so normally she's very happy. And she said, all I want to do is go upstairs and do calculus problems. And my younger daughter looked at her and said, what? Are you crazy? And I kind of was like, oh my God, this is my child. This was how I was. And, she's a normal, she's not, a complete nerd by any stretch of the imagination, but I found solace and value in math. Okay. I loved problem solving. And then I loved being able to kind of say, hey, I did this. Like, this is awesome. I did it. And let's go on to the next one. Bring me something harder. So, I studied math in college and then I became an actuary and I was bored to tears with the actuarial work. Insurance was not my life. I loved Excel. I wanted to be in Excel all the time. I was like, I need to work at Microsoft so I can work with products like these. And lo and behold, I found myself with an opportunity to come to Microsoft as an accountant. I basically convinced them that if I could take actuarial exams and pass those, that I could definitely be an accountant, even though I had never taken an accounting class before in my life. So they hired me as an accountant. I was posting all the revenue for Microsoft. This was almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
And I remember the first day they were talking about debits and credits, and I didn't even know what that was. But so I had my work cut out for me to learn that pretty quickly, but I did. And then I had about 3 different roles in finance within 5 years. And it was incredible. I loved the opportunities I was getting. Every day was a new challenge. And then I had my first child and I knew that I could not work the hours that I was working in finance. And so one of the colleagues that I had moved from finance to HR. He became the head of compensation and benefits in HR. And he said, we really need people like you with this analytics capability in HR. Would you come over to HR and kind of, be part of this team? And I said, sure, if you let me work part-time, I'll do just about anything. And he said, deal. So I went over to HR, not really thinking that it was not in my career plans at all. Okay. But I needed to work part-time and I figured I can do anything as long as I have that balance in my life. What I didn't realize is how much I was just going to love it. Okay. And that kind of combined my passion of problem solving with this kind of untapped field that no one had really kind of nailed at that point. Okay. I mean, people, yes, there were IO psychologists, there were statisticians. These people existed and they did great work, but I didn't feel like we were bringing it together in the right way for the HR organization. So 15 years later, here I am. I'm still doing this type of work. I've built a nice sized team where we can have a lot of impact. And really, our goal is to change the way HR works at Microsoft.
Wow. Very, very interesting story. So thank you very much for sharing that. It's so funny that most people I speak to in your position now, I would say 99% of them didn't think they were going to be in that role. No one planned for it. They were either fell into it or they were pulled into it from other parts of the business.
Right.
Into that role, and you were in it before it was even talked about, right? You're
talking right. No,
before it even existed, or that was, so did you say 10 years ago, right?
15 years ago.
15 years ago. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised that people even used the word HR and analytics together back that far back.
I don't think we really did. All we knew is that HR needed this type of capability. And And really, he was modeling it after finance. Okay. And really, the first things that I did when I got into this role was looked at the lack of rigor that we had around people data compared to financial data. Now, of course, we have to follow the rules of the SEC and, all of this in terms of financial data. We didn't have that type of need on the people data side. Okay. That's changing, but that was not the case 15 years ago. And so I created a closed process like we had in finance, but for HR data, because they didn't even trust the data enough to use, like we couldn't analyze the data until people trusted what was there. Okay. And so it was amazing how once you engaged the right leader, basically HR, the HR generalists at the time, to really have a stake in the ground, all of a sudden the data's cleaner. Okay. And they have a reason to do it because we basically held a carrot at the end. Hey, if you can get clean data, we're going to be able to help you make decisions. We're going to be able to look in and tell you kind of when you're thinking about making a change to a program, we're going to be able to tell you the impact that will have based on the data that we have.
Amazing. So when you think about people analytics now, what does it mean to you and why is it so important for the business?
So I think of it as the new way of working in HR analytics, that whatever business case or business problem you have, there's always a way to look at the data and understand the current state, and then to understand kind of what you're proposing and how the impact could be. Okay. Before we had this type of rigor or data available to do this work, a lot of it was based on anecdotes, it was based on guts, it was based on instincts, and oftentimes you'd spend lots of money and at the end of the day, you'd get it wrong. Okay. And that's to me what HR analytics is about, is to really help HR make better business decisions.
Mm-hmm. I think many of the people that I speak to are just starting the journey where they are now. And what advice would you give to companies that are just starting their journey into people analytics?
Yeah, so you don't have to start big. You don't have to, your first project does not have to be a predictive model. Okay. If you can really get to what are the senior leaders driving in their strategy? What are the huge priorities of your business? And choose one that you have data available for to help. Show the value that way. Start small. Okay. Bring people in, get them so that they want more. Okay, don't show them everything the first time, because then that draws them in, and then they start to realize the power that data can have.
Yeah, I think because that's the question I hear a lot of at our meetings is, what should we focus on and when should we start? Those are the two questions that come up. So you just say really identify an area in the business which they're working on, and then see if you have the data available, and then start there. Would that be right?
Absolutely, because the thing is that every company is driving a unique culture, a unique agenda. You can't say, oh, well, start with attrition. Okay, you might not have a problem with attrition in your company. You can't say start with internal mobility. Well, maybe that's not a focus area for your company at all. Okay, you're not really in the business of moving people around the company into different jobs. Every company has a unique strategy, and so if you start with that strategy, you can really hone in on what's important to the senior leadership team. Because the idea is that you want to make sure that you are doing impactful work. Okay, and so look at the work that's already being done and try to figure out how you can plug into that.
Mm-hmm. Could you share some advice on terms of how to gather that data? Because something again that I hear often is these things are fantastic, but if you don't have the data to support it, or the right data going in to the system, it doesn't work. Could you share some advice on how they can get the right data and best use the data that they have at their hands?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible where we are today compared to 15 years ago when I was starting out. I mean, 15 years ago, we didn't have Workday, okay? We didn't have these HCM, employee data management technologies that we have today. And so oftentimes what you do is just kind of look at the technology that you have and the abilities that it has to capture data, okay, and how to line that up to the strategies and kind of the analyses that you want to do. But today, years ago, we had to basically create our own offline databases for every data element we wanted to capture. We don't have that problem anymore, okay? We at Microsoft, we're using SAP SuccessFactors, okay? And it's great. It's an amazing technology for us to have everything in one place. And even though we use a separate recruiting system, which is iSIMS, we're able to put the data into Azure, into our data lake, and combine them all into one place so that we can report on them. Okay, so even taking, different systems, we don't necessarily need to make sure that they are 100% integrated. We don't have to put all of our data back into SuccessFactors. We can put it into the data lake, and that way we can, put it into Power BI and data visualizations, anything that we want to do in order to analyze. So I feel like technology has really enabled us in a way that just wasn't possible 15 years ago.
No one understands the hard grind that you had in the past. With what you're saying, of course, it seems that definitely requires a completely or a new set of skills within the business to actually manage that data and make these things happen. What skills do you think companies need to acquire or even develop internally in order to effectively do HR analytics in their business?
So I don't necessarily think you always have to acquire. I think developing is definitely something it's what we did when we were starting out. Most of us came from finance, okay, because a lot of those skills were transferable. Once we got a little bit more sophisticated, we did have to go out and find a statistician. And of course, we had industrial and organizational psychologists that worked at Microsoft, but it was more around the fact that we brought everyone together into one team. Okay, so we had the IO psychologist sitting in the people and organizational capability team, and we had kind of the central analytics team that was mostly made up of finance folks or people with MBAs that had more consulting backgrounds. They were sitting in a separate organization, and then we had kind of miscellaneous, I would say, reporting folks sitting within the line organizations, the different businesses. And what we needed to do was bring them all together, because once you bring all of these different skills together, you can start telling a holistic story that we weren't really able to get previously. So I often say that my team is like a big puzzle, okay, there are lots of different puzzle pieces and they have to fit together perfectly. And if they fit together perfectly, you have this beautiful picture at the end. I just wrote an article on LinkedIn about the fact that can change over time, okay, depending on where you are in the journey of people analytics. So where you start out may not be where I am today. Okay, because it doesn't necessarily make sense to hire a data scientist if you can't even get people to trust the data that you have in the system. Like you hire the data scientists once you have a bunch of data that people that can trust and that you can do some deep analytics on.
So what does your team structure look like now?
Yeah, so my organization's made up of 4 teams. I have a advanced analytics and research team. So that team is really my advanced researchers. I have the industrial and organizational psychologists on this team, the data scientists, people that have deep subject matter experts in different types of aspects of HR, like learning strategies. So that is the advanced analytics research team. They also own our engagement survey, our annual engagement survey, and then we have a daily pulse survey. Then I have a team that's aligned to our HR line organizations. Okay, so at Microsoft with over 110,000 employees, you can imagine that we have very, very different businesses. Okay, there are at times that they need specialized analytics for their businesses. Okay. Think of the sales organization compared to the engineering teams. And so we have analysts that are aligned to these different line organizations to kind of help them with specific business challenges that they're having. Then I have another team that's focused on our centers of excellences. Okay, so those are the organizations such as Global Diversity and Inclusion, our Global Talent Acquisition, our HR Services, which is our operations team, and then our talent management and learning and development organizations. So we have that analyst team that's focused on COEs. They're really helping them make really good programmatic decisions. Okay. And then finally, I have a tools and technology team, and they partner directly with our IT team, okay, on the tools and technologies that our customers, our HR customers use internally, okay. And one of the best parts of my job is that we at Microsoft, we're selling products externally to help people in the analytics space. And so we get to partner directly with the engineering teams as well on these products, okay. And oftentimes we are the first customer that uses it. So Power BI is an example where we were using it long before it was available for the public, and we were providing input and feedback, okay, like, hey, you know what, you really need role-based permissions if you're going to have a data visualization tool. Not everyone is going to want to in their company provide access to all the data that they have in the system. And so that was something that, you know, we were able to influence in the beginning on the roadmap. And we continue those partnerships, and we have multiple engineering partnerships today. So those are the four teams that I have right now. And
Fantastic.
That's changed. That's not always been the case. This is kind of the
Sure, I can imagine. You're not going to start off with that. And how long did it, 10 years, 15 years you've been doing this, but did the team change? Does the team change depending on the business needs? And
yeah, so when I started out 15 years ago, like I said, we were decentralized. We were not a centralized analytics team. Okay, and it took years to really create the business case around why we needed to be a centralized people analytics team. And it was only about 5 years ago that we really came together as one team. Okay. When I say one team, like they're, you know, the people and everyone working on people analytics for the HR organization sits in my organization. Okay. We do have some people in compensation and benefits that have that capability, but they're really working on external analytics. Okay. Understanding benchmarks and stuff. So our scope is really internal analytics for the HR organization.
Perfect. Talking about business case that you just mentioned, what have you found to be the most effective way to engage and communicate with your senior leadership team?
Yeah, so it's very interesting that you say that. I mean, one of the struggles that I had for probably the first 5 years that I was in this role is I couldn't get the attention of the senior leadership team. Okay, I thought that there was so much more that we could be doing, but I couldn't get the right people engaged to really make that happen. And so one of the things that we did was we were strategic about the organization that we sat in. Okay. And so there was a reorg, and they weren't sure where they were going to put us, the people analytics team. And so we ended up convincing the chief of staff for the head of HR that we needed to work for her. Okay. This was 10 plus years ago. And we gave her the business case of why. It's like, hey, we need to be aligned with the HR strategy. We need to be aligned with, the work at the top. We are kind of the secret weapon for HR, and the head of HR is going to figure this out. And the chief of staff at the time, she was a little hesitant, but after about 6 months, she was like, oh my God, this is kind of, wow, I had no idea. Yes, this is the right place. Well, then I said, I think I can do even better. Like, I should be the chief of staff for the head of HR. Like, if I led people analytics and I was the chief of staff for the head of HR, imagine the work that we could do. And so that's what I did. I ended up, I was the chief of staff for the previous head of HR. Her name was Lisa Brummel. I did that for about 5 years while I was leading people analytics. It got too much. Okay. I mean, at the end, it was kind of like, okay, but the team is just, it's big now, and we have so much work, more work than we could possibly do. And I need to focus more time on the team, okay, and less time on the chief of staff type roles. So it just so happened that at that time she was retiring and a new head of HR was coming in, and so I passed the baton off to someone else. So I'm no longer the chief of staff, and I'm just working on HR business insights. But that really propelled us in a different way, okay, being connected to the head of HR, where she then connected me directly to the CEO, okay, and we worked on things that was important to the CEO.
Mm-hmm. So looking back then, reflecting, what are some of the things that you think you could have done better to engage the board? And I think one of the biggest challenges is you have the data, but how do you tell it in a story that the leaders can understand?
Yeah, and I think that was definitely what you just articulated is definitely one of, I wish that I had done that better. I wish that I had been better at storytelling way back then, okay? And really connecting the HR analytics to the business value, okay? And showing that without using the data, this is the decision that would have been made. And one of the tactics that we used often to get this type of senior level attention is myth busting. Okay.
Sounds interesting.
What?
So that's a good title.
Yeah, myth busting, exactly. Yeah. And so what I said to my team is, listen, keep your ears open for statements that people are making that are not backed in data, but that we have data to be able to prove or disprove. Okay, so we started doing that, and wow, that really helped a ton, okay? To be able to go to a senior leader that made a comment and say, hey, actually, we did some analysis, and it's actually, the data says the opposite, okay? Or to be able to go to a senior leader and say, hey, that statement that you made, I know it wasn't based in data, but we did the analysis, and that's 100% spot on. Okay, and actually, this is the data now that supports the statement that you just made.
Yeah, I can only imagine how valuable that would be on both ends. And it's great that you was proactive about it. You wasn't waiting for them to come to you to say, we've got this problem. Can you see if it's actually backed in data? You actually took the initiative to go to them. I think that's a big difference.
We had to, though, because people weren't knocking on our doors like they are now. Okay, now it's the opposite.
Yeah, it's true.
Like literally, it's, I have to kind of ward them off and say, hey, we need to prioritize. My favorite word is prioritize. My partner's least favorite word that I say is prioritize.
He's had enough of hearing it, basically.
Yeah.
Do you end up saying it at home then without realizing we need to prioritize? Is that
constantly? Oh, I mean, actually, yes, I've gotten feedback before that says you have to stop saying that word a little bit. You're saying it a little bit too much. You just need to figure out a way to get everything done. So that's how needed this function is right now.
Don't worry, because whenever I ask any HR leader, what's one of the key things, and they say it's the ability to be able to prioritize. Okay. Whenever I ask a chief HR officer, it's like, what's one of the things that make you successful as a chief HR officer? I'd say 90% of them come back and say, I prioritize. What are the nice to have, and what are the strategic decisions that need to be done? And that's how they come. Don't worry about it. You're not the only one. Okay. Could you share one of the projects that stand out to you that you're most proud of, that you delivered, that's something that really is memorable to you?
The work that we've done on onboarding and really the work that we did took a very holistic approach to looking at onboarding from every aspect. Okay. And so we started out with a survey, surveying employees after 1 week, and then we would follow up with a 90-day survey. And we were finding some fascinating results that we just had no idea about. And the fact that sometimes it can take up to 2 weeks for someone to get access to our internal networks. Okay. And what we ended up being able to drill down on, again, using the data, was that if you were a rehire and you wanted specifically your old alias back that you had when you were first hired at Microsoft, it was a very difficult system configuration for us to be able to do that. And it was slowing things down. Okay. And so we, made some changes, just simple changes that we were able to do to stop this. Okay. And, another example was we were under the impression that people would want to come to Microsoft and then kind of look at the different computer options they had and choose their computer. And no, they want their computer on day one. They want to hit the ground running. We're a technology company, so it's like the little things. But So it started out with just these little things, okay? But then using this product that we have called Workplace Analytics, we started getting into behavioral data. And so we started to basically be able to correlate the data that we were getting out of the survey, okay, and the impressions and the perceptions that people were having with the behaviors that were occurring, and whether or not managers were having one-on-ones with their employees. So this Workplace Analytics data looks at calendar and email metadata, in a very, using all the privacy constraints that we have, but understanding kind of how people connect and how people communicate with one another, and understanding the impact that early on, having one-on-ones with your managers, the impact that can have on your perception of your manager, the networks that you grow. I mean, there's just huge goodness in growing your networks early on. And so really, this work is continuing, okay, it's ongoing, but I love the fact that we could start out small with just kind of system challenges and get all the way to behaviors that really inform the onboarding process.
Yeah, I think people underestimate how big those things impact people. The last thing you want on the first day of a job is not being able to access the system and not having a computer. For the first few, I've been there myself. In the last company I left on the first day, I didn't have a computer, and it was, you can choose your computer, but I had to wait a week or two to get it. And I'm sitting there using an old laptop with a random username and password in the meantime until I get a computer. Yeah, I think, and that's kind of the last thing you want to be worrying about in a new job. When you're trying to settle into the role, build relationships, get going. That's so very interesting. And is there any way that those are very specific things that you identified there? Is that the software that helped you identify those, or did it just by literally sitting down with data and analyzing it with the team that you come across these particular areas you did?
You mean on the technology side, or are you talking about the behaviors?
I'm talking about, how did you realize that it was an issue that people were waiting 2 weeks to get
because
a computer?
It showed up on the survey. It showed up on the survey.
Is this a reoccurring thing that people were saying that?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So it was, we didn't really hear the feedback so much because we didn't have a survey mechanism that we were really capturing sentiment. Okay. Holistic. I
see. Okay.
And so, that's another thing that I would say, back to one of your original questions is what is something that, you can, how would you start out? Okay. I think it's super critical that you have subjective data as well as objective data. Okay. And so if you don't have a survey, an engagement survey, or any way to capture sentiment of the organization, I think that's really critical. Okay. And being able to take that type of engagement data and correlate it with performance and other types of outcome data that you have, that's more of the, what I would say, the objective system data that you capture. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's super critical and really opens up to the whys things are happening. Okay. Because often you can get to the what, okay, but you can't get to the why. And the whys are where you can really look at making changes.
I really like that, actually. I like the way you put that. So moving forward, I think the question I keep hearing and everyone keeps saying is, what does the future hold for people analytics? It's something which it's been debated for a while now. It's sort of the buzzword in the industry. What effect do you think technology will have on HR in the coming years?
Yeah, so I have these visions, okay, of what I want, kind of how is HR analytics going to have the broad reach that it needs to, okay? And I really look at this as a technology play. We're coming up with insights, like I told you on onboarding, about managers having one-on-ones with their employees. We need a way to be able to get those into the hands of managers and employees seamlessly so that they take action. Okay. I'll use an example of training. So you get promoted and you become a manager. Okay. Today, you get an email. Congratulations, you've become a manager. Hey, there are some great trainings out there that you can take that will help you in your new manager role. Go to this link and sign up for the trainings that meet your schedule, all that kind of stuff. In the future, what should happen is you should get a little notification on your phone that says, congratulations, you're a new manager. We see that your calendar is available next Friday when there's a new manager training. We know that people that take this new manager training have higher engagement engagement scores, okay, by 10%, whatever. Would you like to sign up for this? Yes. Done. Okay, so it already checked to see that you were free in your calendar. It already told you which training that you should take based on data. Those are examples. Think back to the manager and employee one-on-one. You should be reminded if you do not have a one-on-one on your calendar every single week. And then it should say, you haven't had a one-on-one with your manager in 2 weeks. You're both free for lunch tomorrow. Would you like me to schedule? Yes. Okay, this kind of personalized assistant that uses analytics to drive different behaviors in a seamless way.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Just almost removing the friction and just making a decision for you and allowing you to do that without even having to think. So you're much more likely to do it, right?
Right.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Well, look, that leads us quite nicely onto what we call the quick fire round, where I'm going to ask you 5 questions and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
Yep.
What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a leader in your field?
Oh gosh, the number one thing that was holding back, I think the balance between my work and personal life. You know, I mean, I really felt like when my children were born that I needed to spend more time at home. And I'm so glad that I did that. I will never change that decision, but I think it slowed me down a little bit. And I'm okay with that because at the end, I'm where I want to be.
Fantastic. And what's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
The best piece of business advice probably, so never say no to opportunities. Okay. They're like, you never know where these opportunities are going to take you. And sometimes you just have to take a risk and understand that nothing is forever. Okay. And by taking that risk, you're able to test some things out and make a better decision afterwards.
Mm-hmm. If you don't take it, you never know, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
What's one book do you recommend to our audience and why?
So I just finished Hit Refresh, which is the book that Satya Nadella, our current CEO, wrote. And it's about our cultural transformation that we're on. And gosh, I'd highly recommend it just because it talks about his journey, okay, and his journey of hitting refresh, you know, growing up in India, moving to the United States, the risks that he took in his career. Also talks about the journey that we're on as a company. And because we have not, you know, we've had some rough spots and we've had to really kind of hit refresh ourselves and decide what is it that we are going to stand for and what is the soul of Microsoft. So
fantastic. Well, I'll certainly link that in the description. I'm quite interested. I've been meaning to read that myself, so I'll definitely share that. What's one internet resource that you use to increase your own productivity and also to keep up to date with current events in your field?
Oh, LinkedIn. Okay, I know.
I think I'm just going to have to leave LinkedIn there because it's either LinkedIn or TED Talks.
Yeah, shameless plug since, you know, we're all part of the same company. But
oh yeah, of course. I didn't even make that connection, of course.
But yeah, no, LinkedIn is an incredible tool for productivity and for keeping up. There's this, I also use TrustSphere. Okay, it's this, I get an email about once a month or maybe every other week on just the people analytics stories in the news from TrustSphere. I find that extremely valuable. Right. I think it combs LinkedIn actually.
Really? So do you put specific keywords and then it identifies articles, or is it already populated?
It just, yeah, it's an email. It's an email that has the article links in it already for me.
Fantastic.
So it like chooses 5, you know, every other week or something.
Oh, great. I'm sure that's going to be very helpful for the members. What's one thing about your business that most excites you today?
Yeah, so literally about the technology and the fact that I get to work for a company that not only completely 100% supports people analytics internally, but this is a business for us that we're really looking at, and how do we help the HR professionals out there and with technology and the HCM kind of digital transformation. So I think that's what most excites me right now is just the opportunities that we have ahead of us.
Fantastic. Well, Dawn, you've given us some actionable advice, so I'd certainly know that our members will be a lot better off for it. So thank you very much for that. Give our listeners one parting piece of guidance and also the best way to get in contact with you if they wish to do so.
Yeah, so parting piece of guidance is take risks and start small, because you start small, they will get bigger and people will come. You show the value, you'll have people banging on your door for more. And so that's what I would really challenge everyone to figure out what is one thing that is important to your corporation right now, important to your head of HR, important to your CEO, that you can start to show the value on using data.
Fantastic.
And yep, I'm on LinkedIn, so you
Yep.
can get a hold of me that way. And yeah, I from time to time I will write little posts on LinkedIn about people analytics, sometimes just about my career journey. But that's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Perfect. Well, look, thank you again, guys. Make sure you head over to hrdleaders.com. There you'll find all of the links that we've discussed and the link to the full episode. Again, thank you very much for sharing your journey with our listeners. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.